Hello, I'm Donal McCauley, and welcome to medicsvoices.com, where we talk to the key opinion leaders in health and medicine around the world. Today we're in New South Wales in Australia, and I'm speaking to Jean-Frédéric Levesque. Jean-Frédéric, thank you very much for talking to us. It's a very long way from northern Quebec to New South Wales, but let's take you back to the very beginning. Where did it all begin?
I come from a small community in northeastern Quebec, very near from Labrador. It's a community called Port-Cartier, a little mining town, 5,000, 6,000 people living in the community, and it's about 12 hours drive from Montreal. And of course, in winter, sometimes a bit difficult to access. So a fairly remote place, but also a beautiful place caught between the ocean and very old Laurentian mountains. So a beautiful place to grow up as well.
So tell us about growing up and your school and what stimulated you to do medicine.
Well, I think that medicine came a bit later in my life as something that I would like to do. I have to say that I probably grew up a bit oblivious to what I would eventually do. I mean, I was passionate about ice hockey, playing hockey all the time at the local rink, but also outdoors, in the streets with my friends. And even when the school was closed because of very, very cold temperatures or storms, of course, we were outside on the street playing hockey and pretending to be Wayne Gretzky and, all of our idols. So I think I grew up really close to nature, not quite sure what I would do in the future, but certainly always interested in learning and knowing about things, which I think eventually brought me to science and to medicine eventually. I think that for me, medicine came as an option during high school, towards the end of my high school. And really that's when it became a bit more important. Before that, I was still open to a lot of potential options.
So let's talk about this transition from high school. You went to university in Montreal. Tell us about medical school.
Yeah, our medical school for me was fantastic. Apart from the fact that I was young, I did feel that I was not really mature as a person to be studying medicine and very quickly seeing patients, because I was part of a program where very quickly we were in the hospital interviewing patients, not doing medical stuff really, but starting to learn to interact with people. And of course, fantastic friendships were built, very long hours of studies, of course, and I was someone that wanted to do very well. So I was a very dedicated student, I have to say, but also very busy, involved in the international health group, which of course led me to do some short placements in India, expanding my horizon and just gradually really helping me to find, what was the area of health and medicine that I would be passionate about. But really, medical school for me was an intense time of studies, but also really good friendships and growing as a person and, really becoming an adult during that time.
Well, tell us about these placements because that clearly widened your international horizons.
Yeah, so it came to me with a bit of a background because before starting medicine, I actually took some time off and did go and travel to India, but just to travel in India and Nepal. And this came because I was supposed to participate in the Canadian National Junior Championship in badminton that year. I was in a sports medicine program in college, and I got injured. So instead of having a full term available for the badminton championship before starting university, I ended up with a bit of time on my hands. So spoke to my elder brother, and he suggested, why don't you go to Asia and spend a bit of time there? I had just come back from a month in Mexico, again, really trying to explore the world, etc., and just decided to go. So I flew to Nepal, did trekking, traveled across North India, and then came back to Montreal to start medicine. And therefore, very quickly, I thought, okay, I need to continue to do this. I was really interested in going to Africa next to explore a new continent, new country, new cultures. But because I had that experience in India, already someone older in the class said, I've just come back from India to this fantastic place where you could provide care for indigenous populations of South India in Tamil Nadu, and I can put you in touch with the organization that does that. So of course, then I was like, okay, well, I need to do this. Africa will wait. I'm going back to India, and I did that with my very close friend Chris, and had a fantastic experience traveling from small villages to small villages. Helping doctors to provide mobile clinics to very remote villages in South India, and being exposed to indigenous cultures that, of course, I had never heard about before. So a fantastic experience, again, for a young 21-year-old man.
Well, that really widened your horizons, but I'm interested in this fork in the road where you could have been a sports medicine doc. Tell us about that.
Well, it's interesting because it was never really truly in the cards. I think that I was passionate about sport. I still am. I still play ice hockey here in Australia, and it's always been part of my life. But I was interested in different dimensions of medicine, I think, and very quickly I realized that I was interested in how medicine works as a system. And I mean, it came gradually, of course, but I think that every time I was doing placements during my training and then during my residency, etc., I was looking at things and I was thinking, maybe we can do this differently. And I was always very interested by new treatments coming and how they would disrupt the way we're providing care. And that has been a driving force. So sports medicine was never really contemplated. I did think about surgery for a while. I was interested in so many different things that, I think it could have ended up being, different. But at some point, I was just really clear that my skill set was also driving me to think more about systems, think about clinical innovation, and really dedicate my career to, try to improve healthcare and health systems.
So when you graduated, then you did some clinical jobs, but you did a master's in community health and then did a PhD. Take us through those.
Yeah, so the master's was actually part of my residency program. So I had to do it to obtain my Royal College certification. So I did that, and what I did for that project was to work with refugees in Montreal. I was working as a clinician at the refugee clinic, and it just made sense to use that clinical setting as a place where I would do a study. And I studied their acceptance of the screening test for tuberculosis, which of course is a sensitive topic. Refugees, when they arrive in new countries, they're vulnerable as a population, and you do want to strike the right balance between offering them a service that will help their health, but in a way that will not jeopardize their pathway as refugees, because of course, you want to do the best for them as human beings, and that sometimes mean that you have to compromise what could be achieved from a health perspective, because if they don't accept the treatment, then you've lost the relationships entirely. So we've studied those factors that enable refugee claimants to accept the screening test. Working with a fantastic group of committed clinicians, very good friends as well, of course, and we did publish that study. And then I think that what happened is that I just became very passionate about scientific methods, wanted to learn more, and therefore, still as part of my residency program, I committed to do a PhD. So still wanted to go to Africa. That was a goal that I had, really wanted to experience this. But again, the same thing happened. When I started to talk to potential supervisors, they said, well, you've got that experience in India. You've been a few times, you understand the culture. We've got this fantastic project in Kerala, in South India. And we already have a local team. You could actually go there and do your PhD in Kerala. And therefore, again, it just became a no-brainer. I had to do this. It was a fantastic opportunity, and committed to a PhD, spent a few years doing this, and studied inequalities in access in urban South India. And really what I did was to assess how people were accessing healthcare for chronic conditions and infectious diseases, etc., in different types of living settings. So slums, as well as more formalized settings, really trying to understand how the healthcare system, formal and informal, was responding to the needs of the people living in urban settings in South India. So fantastic experience again, learned a lot in terms of methods, and became passionate about research. And it's funny because I really, truly still remember in med school, one of my colleagues was saying, oh, I really want to do clinical trials and research. And my first reaction was, oh, boring. And now the reality is that I lead clinical innovation and research in New South Wales, and life has taken me probably to places where I didn't think I would go.
Well, before we go to Australia, we have to talk a little bit about your enormous contribution to primary care in Canada because your colleagues speak very highly of what you achieved. So tell us a little bit about your involvement with primary care in Canada.
Thank you, Donald. Primary care was probably my first really committed area of investigation. I finished my PhD and my residency program, and then started to work in Montreal, and really got involved in a team that had just received a mandate to study primary care reforms in Quebec. That was at the time of the establishment of the family medicine groups in Quebec, at a time where in Ontario there was a lot of different new models of provision of service delivery in primary care. And when I got recruited to be part of that team, they said, primary care is really a priority topic for us. And we've got decision makers that have to really guide this reform, and they need very good evidence to do so. So do you want to be part of that team? And again, I thought, well, you know what? I think that's really important. It's very relevant. And it's probably a way where we can, a way we can make difference for people. Access to primary care remains a really tricky issue in different countries. And looking at those different investments in Quebec, new models, new ways to provide team-based care, I thought, let's give it a go. So I was really lucky to be mentored by Reynald Pinault and other colleagues, really being embedded in a team that had a really, really strong methodological background and a clear commitment to do research that would be used by clinicians, research that would be used by policymakers as well. And that was very formative because you can do research for the sake of developing knowledge, and I think that's very important. There's so many areas of health and healthcare that we still need that pure knowledge development to happen. But what really was the essence of that team is that we were so close to decision makers, politicians, clinicians working in those settings and trying to implement those new models, that it became a real medical kind of act of being the researcher that would work with those people and making the connection between the research and the clinical practice. And that was absolutely rewarding. And I gave it all of my, time and effort, probably for a full decade of commitment to primary care research. And that led to, amazing projects, amazing comparative projects on primary care around the world as well. And that's where I also made, long life life long lifetime friends, really, because it's also a beautiful field in terms of the people that commit their time in life to that field of research.
Well, those comparative projects are really, really important in developing models. So tell us a little bit about the people you worked with and the models that you worked with.
Yes, so I mean, of course, a lot of collaborations across Canada. Worked with Brian Hutchison from Ontario, Sabrina Wong from British Columbia, Mylène Breton from Quebec. A lot of different people from different provinces. Lots of comparative studies of those reforms, because all of the Canadian provinces really embarked on those significant transformation of how care was provided in primary care. And that led very quickly also to be connected with some researchers from the US, researchers from Australia and the UK, Grant Russell in Australia and Mark Harris, some of my very close colleagues. And in the US, Ben Crabtree and Will Miller were my main collaborators. And in the UK, did a lot of work, but mostly I have to say probably receiving mentorship from Martin Rowland, a very good colleague as well, and someone that has influenced my career significantly. And that led to studies where really we were, not just assessing primary care reforms and new models, but really trying to understand how different country context was actually influencing the way clinicians were working and the way those new models would influence that practice, which was, again, a really, really rewarding experience. And then that led to also do studies where we didn't want just to study those emerging models. We started to work with decision makers to actually promote new models and start to pilot and trial them, because we could see that the primary care reforms had achieved quite a lot in terms of implementing new generic ways to organize a clinical practice, for example, generic ways to organize pathways for patients. But there were subgroups that still faced significant problems in access to healthcare, and we had to think about innovative models, things that had not been tried yet. And we were a group of researchers really trying to do this across different countries across the world, which again was a very, very rewarding experience.
Well, you certainly had an international flavor to your work, and this brought you to Australia. Tell us about that move.
Yeah, so Australia came because of one of the collaborations that we had established. So I was working with Grant Russell, as I said, Mark Harris, but also Jane Gunn from the University of Melbourne. And Jane, during one of the session that we had as part of this research project, just asked me, would you be interested to do a sabbatical in Australia? We've got this project, which is a collaboration between University of Melbourne and a local decision-making body. And she said, I think that you could help us with this, and spoke to my family about it. And we said, well, that'd be a great experience to try, and submitted a proposal to Jane, and then got to be welcomed at University of Melbourne for a year-long sabbatical, and I went a few times, and during part of that time, brought my family to Melbourne to live for a few months, with kids that were at the time in second year of high school and last year of primary school. So quite formative times for my son and my daughter, but I think that overall for the family, it turned out to be a really good experience. This being said, we came back to Montreal. Everybody going back to their previous schools, previous jobs, friends and family, etc. But then it didn't take long before I received a call from a headhunter saying that they were looking for someone to lead a health information agency in New South Wales, and my name had been mentioned, and would I be interested? And of course, the first response was no. We've done Australia. This is something that we've done. But they called again And as a family, we started to have conversations about what this could mean. And we decided to try the experience. So that's how I got to be the chief executive of the Bureau of Health Information in New South Wales, which was great experience. Moving to Sydney, very different from Melbourne, but an absolutely beautiful place. And we still live here. And that's how we got to be in Australia.
Well, tell us about your current job because it sounds really exciting.
So my current job is a dual role, so a bit innovative in its own. And the way it happened is that after close to 5 years as the chief executive of the Bureau of Health Information, I was offered to lead an organization called the Agency for Clinical Innovation. Like the Bureau of Health Information, the ACI, as we say here, is an organization that we call a pillar agency. So it's an organization at arm's length of ministry. And the Agency for Clinical Innovation's role is to lead clinical engagement across a really broad range of medical professions and allied health and nursing involvement. We've got 42 clinical networks that span the state. And we work with them at designing, piloting, and implementing at scale innovations in healthcare. And those innovations are about new technologies, but also about new ways to work, new pharmacological therapies, and also increasingly advanced therapies like CAR T cell therapies for cancer, for example. And I started that role in 2017. I'm still the chief executive of the Agency for Clinical Innovation, so I've been 8 years in the role. But over the last 3 years, I've also been asked to combine this role with a new role that was being established in New South Wales. And that's the role of Deputy Secretary for Clinical Innovation and Research. And the goal was to really create the connection from research to translation to transformation of healthcare and really help to coordinate ecosystems that really do not always really work well together. Everybody's heard about the fact that sometimes treatments and innovations may take up to 14 years to actually be embedded in clinical practice. And the attempt here in New South Wales is to integrate different organizations and mandates in a way that aligns their work so that we bridge those gaps. But at the same time, the goal was not to merge them all into a very big kind of monolithic structure that maybe wouldn't be as agile and as creative and innovative as we want. So we kept the Agency for Clinical Innovation and other pillars in place. We brought the Office for Health and Medical Research within a division of the ministry that I now lead. And my role is really to try to orchestrate those connections, making sure that we propose to government ambitious, plans, and that we really work with the system at making sure that those innovations get used in clinical practice. So it's a fantastic role. I have to say, I feel blessed to be able to do that job. I work with clinicians from all walks of medicine and health, from surgery to oncology to respiratory medicine, primary care, and we have programs in all of those different areas, really working with clinicians at trying to improve care for the population of New South Wales and contribute to the implementation science and knowledge about that, and trying to share that experience and expertise also with colleagues from other states and other countries. So that's my current role. It's a bit of a challenge, of course, because I lead a ministry department and I lead an organization that is at arm's length of that structure. But, we've been innovative in the way we've established things, and it's working out.
Well, let's talk about something slightly different for a moment because I couldn't think of a greater contrast than the snowy lands of northern Quebec to the sunshine of Sydney. So tell us a little bit about the cultural differences and the organizational differences you've had to adapt to.
Yeah, so it's obviously two Well, it's both two very different countries and setting, but also at the same time very similar. So I moved from a very vast, sparsely populated, federated with indigenous culture and background and extreme temperatures country to another one. But all of those different aspects are not exactly the same. So Australia and Canada do share a lot of characteristics, um, yeah, extreme temperatures, and you do experience them every year. It's not the same thing, of course, but that connection with the climate is very important in both countries. The indigenous cultures are very different as well. But having grown up in a remote community in the northeast of Quebec, where obviously there were there were a few First Nation communities all around me, and I played ice hockey against some of those communities when I was a kid. And moving to a place where Aboriginal culture is extremely important, something we want to continue to promote, I felt a very strong connection. The fact that we have to work with a national government, being in a state, is not too dissimilar to work with the national government and being in a province in Canada. And lands of migrations, very diverse communities, all of that I felt was very similar. But I arrived in a place where um, first the healthcare system has got some significant differences. Like in Australia, there is a private sector. It has a very clear role to play, and the public sector works in coordination as much as possible with that sector. In Canada, this is something that remains a very strong debate. And whilst in Australia, it's never in the news. It's not something that people really talk about that frequently. Um, Although there are, of course, tensions between those sectors, but it's something that we work with here. And I had to learn to understand that, so that I would work in an effective way. Culturally, of course, there are similarities between Australians and Canadians as well. I think there's no question. There is a very welcoming feel to Australia that I feel we do provide as Canadian as well. For newcomers, I felt very welcomed. When I arrived here, very quickly I had to be in the news, on radio, on TV, talking about the performance of the New South Wales healthcare system. And I felt like, who am I, from northern Quebec, coming to Australia, looking at data, talking to clinicians, visiting hospitals, and then saying, we've got issues here, or this is working really well. But the reality is, even despite my accent, everybody was absolutely understanding. And I was told very quickly, Australia is a land of accents, and yours is nice. We enjoy it. Don't worry about it. And there's a simplicity and acceptance that really I felt made it easier for us to come to Australia. Little known fact: there is ice hockey in Australia. There is also at times snow in Australia. We do have mountain regions where there is a bit of cold, a bit of snow. And of course, my family and I find different ways at times to reconnect with this, so that we can still enjoy a bit of cooler weather. But it's never quite, of course, like the Canadian winters.
Well, you anticipated my final question was to ask you, how does the chief executive of ACI relax?
Listen, I've always been a musician, so I've always kept playing music. That's one of my go-to plays to relax. I've learned to play classical guitar from quite a young age, and this is something that has always accompanied me in my life. And so I play music. That's really something that helps me to relax. I listen to music, of course, but living in Australia, of course, now walks on the beach with my wife is something that we really enjoy as well, to disconnect, and walking in the beautiful mountains and forests that are around Sydney. The Blue Mountains is also something that is a bit newer to us, but we really enjoy doing to relax as well. And I like to write, so sometimes also writing is some of the things that I do to relax.
Jean-Frédéric, thank you very much for sharing so much of your life, your professional life, and your home life with us. Thank you very much indeed. Merci.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.